Hey guys. Good morning for me. It's almost noon. Just trying to move forward here. We only have this week, next week, and one more week of things that I'm gonna have you do. So please be pushing through, finishing strong. My juniors, you're gonna have school next year, so it's good to finish strong and just keep working, maintain those habits and maintain that growing of knowledge. And then my seniors, depending on what your plans are for next year, you will still have to be like doing stuff, so stay in those good work habit, maintain those good work habits and work hard, okay? Sorry about the glare. I feel like it's too dark in here if I have the curtains closed, and then my husband switched the room around, and so the window's right behind me and it's really bright, but I don't like it dark, so sorry. Okay, so this week we're gonna have 2 sets of notes, starting with today at supply and demand. My seniors, you may have already seen some of this with econ, but we're gonna do it for us in our business unit. And the next set will be pricing, and then you have one worksheet this week that has practice for both sets of notes. Okay, so make sure you do the worksheet after you've done both sets. Okay, they're pretty short in amount of slides, but some slides do have a bit of writing. Okay, so let's get started. Make sure you pause anytime you need to, or rewind. But definitely pause so that you can write stuff down. Okay, and then as always, if you have any questions, hit me up on Remind or our Zoom meetings. So we're going to try one for this week, Wednesday at, what did I tell you guys? 4:30 p.m. So we'll switch it up and have one a little bit later, and hopefully more of you will be awake. And then, as always, you can message me on Remind. Okay. We'll also have a Zoom on Thursday, normal time at 11 a.m. Okay. So, today we're going to be doing, supply and demand. Our EQ is how do supply and demand affect the sales of a product? Okay. So again, this is a business unit if you're going into the business of selling things. Okay. There we go. What does the graph tell you about fares from Baltimore? And then predict the fare from Baltimore to a distance of 1,600 miles. Okay, so here's our little graph I want you to look at. After I'm done talking, go ahead and press pause and actually try this. Okay, so down here though, we have the distance in miles. And so this is the distance away from Baltimore. So 0 is where Baltimore is at. And then further and further away from Baltimore. Baltimore is in Maryland. Okay, just in case. And then the y-axis over here, that's how much the airfare would cost. So this is going to be lowest price fares from Baltimore. So we're going to say what's flying, and so a fare would be the cost. Okay, so for example, this dot right here represents probably about 180 miles away from Baltimore, and it would cost about, we'll say if this is 80, this is 100, and so it's like $105. Okay, so this dot, this point, represents a ticket purchased about 180 miles away from Baltimore, and it was for the cost of $105. Okay, so each of these dots represents basically like a plane ticket for a certain distance away from Baltimore, and then for a certain price for the Y value. Okay, so what do you call it? So what does this graph tell us about the fares from Baltimore? So use that sentence structure that I gave you on last week's worksheet. As the distance increases, the fares blank. So what do the fares do? Do the fares do the fares increase, or do the fares decrease? Do the fares go up as it's further away from Baltimore, or do the fares go down as it's further away from Baltimore? And then this prediction one, predict the fare from Baltimore to a distance of 1,600 miles. Well, here's 1,600. Okay, notice there's no dots right on 1,600. So what you do is you use the line of best fit to make a prediction. Okay, so you go to the 1600 up to the line of best fit and then tell me what that price is. All right, so go ahead and pause and do that. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you paused. What does the graph tell you about fares from Baltimore? I would be looking for you to say, the graph shows that as the distance from Baltimore increases, the fares in dollars also increases. So that was the sentence I was looking for. And then predicting the fare from Baltimore. So you go to 1600 up to the line of best fit. And that looks like it's right on that line. So $260 would be the predicted cost of a fare. 1,600 miles away. Okay. So that's that. That's a little review of scatter plots and lines of best fit for you. Okay. So here's some vocab. I'm going to read it and then you can go ahead and pause and write. So demand is, so we're looking at supply and demand, right? So these are written in alphabetical order. So supply and demand. Demand is the quantity of items that consumers want to buy. Okay, so we are consumers, like naturally right now. We go and purchase things. We consume product. Okay, so the demand is the quantity or the amount of items that people want to buy. And then we're going to come down here to supply. Supply is the quantity of items available to be sold, right? You have the people that are supplying the product to the store, and so they're only going to supply a certain amount. Okay, back up here, we'll go up. So quantity is the amount or value, so it's going to be a number of items, quantity of items. Function, okay, we're going to go over what a function is mathematically in a second. But it's a rule that assigns a unique member of the range to each element of the domain. So real quick review, domain are the X's, range are the Y's. All right. And then last up, we have equilibrium. We'll hit this on our last slide today. But this is where our supply and demand functions intersect. They equal each other. So equilibrium. Okay. So pause and write if you need to, or please do actually. Okay, so first step, we want to look at how does a function work, okay? Because these supply and demand are both functions, so it's important that we understand what the heck a function actually is. All right, so with a function, each element or number, okay, in the domain is paired with only one element in the range. So for example, okay, function versus not a function. So here, every different X has a Y, right? So 1 has only a 1. The 2 is only paired with a 2. 3 is only paired with a 3. Okay, these could be any numbers. They don't have to be the same. It doesn't have to be 1, 1. It could be 1, 5 or 1, 7. Okay, but over here, okay, we have the number 1 and it's paired to 2 different numbers. Okay, so every X can only match up with one Y. You cannot have the same X going to 2 different Y values. All right, so that's what causes it to not be a function. Okay. Okay. So we're going to look at demand first. So what does a demand function tell us? I highly suggest pausing at the end of the slide. Okay, so we're going to go through a few things. So a demand function compares the price of an item to the quantity that people want to purchase. All right, so with demand, these are all like different ways you could see the graph, but they will always have the X value will be the price of the item, and then Q is the quantity demanded. So the quantity, the number of items that people would want to buy at that price. Okay, so it should make sense, right? If you had a pair of shoes, okay, and we'll say that they are usually $100, right? And so people would want to buy it for $100. There'd be, say, this many people that want to buy it for $100. Okay, so $100 price. This is the number of number of people that would want to buy it. Well, as the price increases, right? So as the price goes up, right? If that same pair of shoes was $200, there'd be a lot less people willing to pay that amount of money, right? Versus the other direction, if the price was lower, so if that $100 pair of shoes was all of a sudden only 50 bucks, right? There's going to be a lot more people that want to buy that because it's such a good deal. Okay, so demand, as the price goes up, less people will want to buy it, right? So, my little face. Looking at each of the demand curves, as the price of an item increases, people will buy, where's my little marker? There it is. We'll do purple to match the slides. People will buy less of that item, right? So the demand function decreases. The demand function goes down because as the price increases, as the price goes up, the number of people will buy less of that item. Okay. Next up, supply. So supply functions compare the price of the item still. So the X's are still going to be the price. But this time, a supply is the number of items that the suppliers are willing to provide. Oops. So think about it from the other end now. If you're the one making the product, right? The more money you can get off of it, the more you're willing to supply, right? Like, oh, if it's I'm only going to be able to sell it for $5, I'm not going to really want to make a bunch of those because I'm going to lose money. Versus, oh, I'm going to be able to sell it for $100. Heck yeah, I'm going to make a bunch of those so that I can bring in that money. I'll make more money off of it. Okay. So here, looking at each of the supply curves. So these are each supply curves. It can look either way, but all of them, notice, they go up. From left to right, they go up. Okay. So if an item sells at a higher price, companies will make more of that item. Okay. And then, next slide, how do companies know how many items to make? So you can't just have these super expensive things, right? Because yeah, the companies will want to make lots of them, but when they're super expensive, less people will buy them. So companies, they want to live in what's called equilibrium. Okay. Everybody's happy at equilibrium. So if customers will want to buy a certain number of items and manufacturers are willing to make, we'll say K items, where they meet is called equilibrium. Okay. So for example here, so say at $3, because it's the price, right? At $3, K number of people, or the suppliers, so the suppliers will only want to supply this much, but people would have been willing to buy this many, right? All the way up here. This is the quantity. So here, businesses they're not going to lose money, but they're losing potential money, okay? Because they're only willing to supply this many, but this many people would have bought it. So they could have made money here. Over here, we'll say that this is $7. Okay, so here's my supply graph. Here's my demand graph. We put them together. And at $7, people will buy this many, and suppliers up here are supplying this many items. So if the suppliers are supplying more than what people are willing to buy, they're going to lose money, right? They're going to have this extra amount of items that nobody's buying, so they're going to lose money. So the sweet spot is right here. So when the both people, the suppliers and then the consumers, are willing to, suppliers are willing to make a certain amount and then buyers are willing to buy that same amount, that's where it's like, that's what's called equilibrium. Okay. So the same amount will be made as they'll be sold. So that's where the supply and the demand graph intersect. That's equilibrium. Okay. I think that's it for this one. Yep. So that's it for this slide, for this PowerPoint. And hopefully you learned a little bit about supply and demand. And then on my next one, we'll go into how we choose and make those prices for that. Okay? Thank you guys.